Hello, my name is Hannah. I'm the maker and designer behind HERBGARDEN Knitwear, and usually I share knitting podcast on this channel, but today I have a little Q&A video for you. You kindly submitted your questions on Instagram, and I will answer them today, and I hope you will enjoy it. So let's start with the first question right away. Do you have a plan before starting to knit your designs, or do you start knitting and make notes as you go? It is a little different from design to design, but in general I have an idea in my mind and then I start swatching. Usually it's more than one swatch, and within this time that I'm swatching, my idea might change a little bit. And then in most cases, when I'm happy with my swatch, when it's blocked and dry, I just start knitting, and I might make some adjustments to my original idea while I knit. As I go, I just check how the fit is and if I like how it's working up. And in this time, I might make some notes depending on how much what I am doing in the project differs from what I usually do. So if it's, for example, a circular yoke sweater, then the construction is pretty forward, so I usually won't make notes at all. I only make notes if I know I need a certain stitch count later, for example. And in regards of grading, I usually do it after I knit the garment, with the exception of designs where I am not sure in the beginning if the construction works out for a lot of sizes. So I know I can usually make a circular yoke sweater like this. This is, by the way, my Abenteuer sweater, which is the German word for adventure. I knitted this on a road trip, but I'm getting off topic now. If it's a circular yoke sweater, I am usually pretty confident that I am able to grade it to many sizes. But if I have a special construction, something that is unusual to me, then I might do the grading before I start to knit to avoid that I have a finished design that I love in the end, but that I cannot grade to fit my size range, because that would be very, very frustrating to have it all done and then realize that you cannot transfer it to the other sizes. But if I know up front that the grading won't be a problem, I usually do it afterwards, after I knit the item. And regarding pattern writing, that is kind of the last step. So let's say, as I said, it's a little different from case to case, but in most cases I will swatch and then I will start knitting the sample in my size, and then I will grade the whole design, and then I will write down the actual pattern, the instructions for it. So that is mostly my process, and I would only take notes if I do something very very special, very unusual that I am not very familiar with. And usually I'm bad at taking notes, and luckily that is not too much of an issue, because I am very good at reading my knitting afterwards. So I could just lay this sweater on a table and count all the stitches and rows, and I wouldn't have to make notes for that. So this is always something that I can check later on the finished item. That's fine for me. Yeah, I think that is everything for this question. So do I have a plan? Yes, I do have a plan, like in my head. I do not write the pattern first and then start knitting the item, but during the whole process, swatching and also during knitting the sample, my plan can change, which is usually the reason why I a little shy to show you what I'm currently working on, because I am always afraid that I will get your hopes up for something and then realize half the way that I won't be able to finish it, or it doesn't work out the way that I wanted it to. Yeah, so yes, I do have a plan, but it's not set in stone. It's very fluid during the time that I knit the sample. Only after the sample is done, then of course the whole design idea is final, kind of. Yeah. I hope this answers the question. By the way, I am working on my Seaborn socks. I already made the first one. It is not blocked yet. It looks a little wonky, but I really love this little stitch detail here at the cuff. The pattern is available on Ravelry, and I really enjoy working on something easy while we talk, so I'm just knitting in the round. So, question number 2. Any tips for a designer on a budget? That's a very interesting question, because I think that is something I did not quite good in the beginning when I started designing. Maybe let's first talk about the expenses a designer has. So obviously you have to buy yarn to design, and I'd say that you usually have to buy a little more yarn than a knitter who is not designing themselves, because you have a little bit of trial and error. And of course, in most yarns you can rip back, but there are some yarns that really lose their fluffiness if you rip them back. For example, some of these blown alpaca yarns, they really there's a huge visible difference if I would knit half a sleeve and with yarn that I have already knitted with once. So if I had like half a sleeve that has not been ripped and the other half that has been ripped out, that would be a huge difference. So sometimes you just need a little bit more yarn in order for the samples to look nice. And then of course another big expense is the tag editing. So a tag editor is a person who checks your pattern. I won't get into that too detailed into that right now, because I have a whole video which is an interview with my tag editor where you can learn all about tag editing. I will link that below for you. And what other expenses does a designer have? Sometimes you might want to have professional pictures taken for your knits, which is also kind of expensive. So I guess that would be the first thing if you are on a budget that you do not necessarily need to do. Most of us have quite good cameras in our mobile phones right now, so I think you do not necessarily need a photographer to take your pictures, which of course will not result in pictures as good as taken by a photographer, but I think it's good enough. I have not had taken pictures of all my designs by a photographer. I worked with a photographer twice, and it was absolutely wonderful because the pictures were so stunning. I myself could never replicate that, but I still feel that the pictures that I am able to take myself are good enough to represent my samples. So that is the first thing that I feel you can omit if you work on a budget. Don't work with a photographer, but rather take the pictures yourself or ask a friend. That's also something that I only thought of later, kind of, I don't know why, but as the years went by, I learned that some of my friends take really, really stunning pictures, and so I sometimes ask them if they are so kind to go out to the park with me and take some pictures. So where else can you save money? So I would not recommend to save money on the tag editing. That is also a huge topic that we discussed in the other video, but just to say the most important parts, if you're just starting out and your patterns are not tag edited, people will notice. I'm pretty sure they will. You will have minor mistakes if you're lucky, major mistakes if you're unlucky, but you want your patterns to be flawless when you're starting out, because people have the tendency to go back to designers whose pattern they really loved and avoid designers they have made bad experiences with. So don't save on that. If save on any other things, but don't save on the tag editing. I think where you can save on best is yarn. One thing is, for example, if you knit with thinner yarns, you usually can get a sweater for less money as if you're knitting in really chunky yarns, because if you weight the whole sweater afterwards, the chunky yarn sweater will of course be heavier, and therefore you will need more wool. And if you work with thinner yarn, then the sweater is lighter and the yarn is usually less expensive. Because if you have two skeins of yarn, and one is very chunky, very heavyweight, and another one is very lightweight yarn, those skeins usually do not have a huge price difference. So but with the chunky yarn you need a lot of more skeins than with the fingering weight yarn. So that might not be an answer that will make you guys happy, but try to work on 3mm needles or 4mm needles and not with the super chunky yarns. What else? I would have a look at yarns that are local to you. That will save you a lot of money. For example, I'm located in northern Germany, and I usually try to avoid ordering yarn from the US or Canada, even though there are lovely yarns out there. That's not the issue at all. There are stunning yarns there that I would love to try, but the shipping and everything would be very expensive. So try to find yarn that is local to you, and therefore you will have either no shipping costs or very little shipping. If you buy in a local to you yarn store, if you have a yarn store that is local to you, that would also save you money. Not only because you don't have shipping to pay for, but you have no risk that you do not like the yarn. So if you order online, then you might have to pay for shipping, and then you don't like the yarn and need to send it back on your own costs. So if you buy in a store, you have a guarantee, because you saw the yarn, you touched the yarn, that you like it. And I think there are some very good quality and low-priced yarns, or very fairly priced yarns out there, mostly woolen yarns from Scandinavia. So of course, if you're in the US, that might not be a good option for you because you have to get it shipped. But I feel like if you live in Europe, then I would definitely have a look into the Scandinavian yarns, because I feel they are always a very good quality and a very good price. Yeah, so try to not go for all the beautiful hand-dyed fingering yarns that is super expensive, but go for yarn brands, which is usually much less expensive. And if you want, you can always check Ravelry, for example, to see how widely spread that yarn is available. So you don't have to use something just because it is affordable that nobody else works with. So there are plenty very affordable yarns that are used by many knitters, and I would go for those yarns if you just start out designing. One other thing that we have not talked about yet is advertisement. So usually on social media and also on platforms like Ravelry, you can pay for advertisement. I have not yet tried that on Instagram, for example, but I have tried that on Ravelry, and my experience with that is that it didn't really make a difference. So usually, if I'm lucky, then I got through the advertisement that I paid for, I got as many sales that I just covered the costs for the advertisement. So it is just no gain there. So I would not do that in the beginning. If somebody has experiences with advertisement on Instagram, paid advertisement, then please let me know in the comments. I would be very interested about that. So far I have not tried it because I fear that you might get more likes for your posts, but I'm not sure if that really converts into sales. So maybe to sum this up a little bit, you do not necessarily need a photographer to take your pictures if you work as a designer on a budget. Do not skip the tech editing, even though that costs money too. I highly recommend that you do that step. And try to save on yarn. You can save lots of yarn, lots of money on yarn, because you can have beautiful woolen sweaters for I don't know, 30-40 euros if you work with fingering yarn, or sport weight yarn or something like that, like with a lighter weight yarn. And you do not need to buy like these super expensive hand-dyed yarns to get gorgeous sweaters. That would be my advice. Question number 3 is, where do you get inspiration from? That can be anything, to be honest. I am sometimes inspired by sweaters that I see on other people or in stores or on TV, in movies. Sometimes I'm just inspired by color combination. Sometimes I am inspired by some kind of painting or artwork or something like that. And I also sometimes am inspired by fashion from different decades. That is also very inspiring, I think. And one thing that inspires a lot, for me at least, is yarn. And having yarns in my hand, holding colors together, see if they match. Maybe sometimes you just see some skeins laying in your stash next to each other that you never would have thought to use together, but they look absolutely gorgeous together, and sometimes that sparks an idea too. Yeah, I think aside from all the other things that I already mentioned, yarn is really something that inspires a lot for me. Is there something else? Sometimes even nature inspires me. And usually I find that I get most inspired when I am not trying hard to find an idea, but sometimes ideas come to me just before I go to sleep, or when my head is not focused on finding a new idea. That is sometimes the best time to get very good ideas. So the next question is, where did you learn how to calculate increases for designing yoke sweaters? I'm not sure if I have like one thing that I learned it from. I started knitting circular yoke sweaters pretty early when I started knitting sweaters. I believe the second sweater I ever knit was a circular yoke sweater, and I did the whole calculations myself on that sweater based on a pattern that I had bought previously. That was a raglan cardigan. So the very first garment I knit was a raglan style cardigan, so with this increased lines here. And then I wanted to knit a circular yoke sweater with my own stitch pattern and design. Maybe I can insert a picture here of that sweater, because I do not longer have it with me. And what I basically did was I knew from the raglan style sweater how many stitches I needed within, how many increases I needed within the circular yoke, and then I just spread them out differently. So that would be something you could do if you have a design that you like and you just want to make a sweater for yourself and not publish a design. Then you could just take a raglan style sweater that you love and respread the increases, that they are not just aligned here but spread out all over the yoke. And after I have done that, which worked out quite fine for me, I knit several patterns of other designers with circular yoke sweaters. I believe one was the shift sweater, or is it the shifty sweater, like with the mosaic knitting from Andrea Mowry. And I did a few patterns of other designers, and I felt like after I've done that, I just got a sense of how that worked. And I believe there's also a video of a lovely lady who's very knowledgeable. I believe her name is Suzanne Bryan, and she has lots and lots of very helpful knitting videos, and I think I might have watched that too. I usually, with anything I want to learn about knitting, I just go on the internet and try to find as much information about this topic as I can. This is usually how I learn. I watch videos, but I also read blog posts and whatever I can get my hands on, basically. So there's really not one thing that I learned it from. I learned it through experience. I learned it by seeing how other people do it. I learned it by reading and watching other people describe their process. Yeah, I usually, if I want to know anything, I'm just a huge sponge for all this knowledge. I suck up everything that I can find. But it's actually not very difficult if you are working with a stockinette sweater. So my advice would be, first, if you want to calculate the increases on a circular yoke sweater for yourself, then first do it just in stockinette and let it get more difficult from sweater to sweater by adding some patterns, stitch patterns or colorwork patterns step by step. But the easiest way to do it is just on a stockinette sweater. Yeah, so just go ahead and give it a little bit of trial and error, and I'm sure you're going to find that it's not that difficult. If you want to, you could always look at free patterns. Although we all know that free patterns are not always the best ones, but there are some very popular free patterns out there, so you could just have a look at them, at those patterns, and see how they distribute the increases, and then just try to find similarities throughout these patterns. But of course you cannot use the math of a free pattern and just turn it into your own pattern. That's not, that's not okay. But just to get a sense of how it is done, that is usually very helpful. Yeah, to just learn from from the work of others, reverse engineer it, kind of, to see what measurements to get. What measurements you get with the different stitch counts and the gauge. So the next question is, what have you found to be the most natural ways for you to grow your platform? So I would love to hear your thoughts about that too, because I guess that is a little bit of a struggle for all of us. It's sometimes very hard to grow your platform, and I think there are several aspects that I have found to be working for me, like some things that other people say too, like posting on Instagram and on YouTube regularly. So to try to not have huge gaps between your posts. And the other thing that I found always makes a huge difference is that you should be mindful of the content you are sharing. It should be content that is as valuable to others, and that is usually content with either like general information, knitting help, knitting tips, something like that, and even more so content where you share your own experiences, what worked good for you, what worked best, things that are happening behind the scenes and happening in your mind while you do all those things in the background. So I believe that are things that are really helpful for other knitters. If you share about anything that could be helpful for others, I think that is some content that is really interesting. And if you share your own joy, I think that is something that is really helpful for others. Not helpful, like very attractive, I guess. If you have true joy in what you do, then that will usually infect others a little bit. Like joy can be spread, you know. And I think that is something that really helps. Which, of course, like these two things together is really hard to do, like post content regularly and make sure it is valuable content at the same time. That is difficult, because not always so much is happening behind the scenes, and sometimes we do not make as much progress. So that is something that is very difficult already. Yeah. I think one of the most important things is to find a way to do this as yourself, to not just copy other people or not think that you need to fulfill some kind of norm or some kind of standard. Just go with your own style. I think that is very important too. Just do it as you and not as anybody else, because in most cases people will notice some kind of, I don't know, that something doesn't feel right. Just be yourself. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. I don't have, as you can see, I don't have a lot of good advice. I think when it comes to YouTube, I think it is very important to have good quality sound and video, good quality video, like optical quality, I mean, technical quality, I don't know, like a good resolution, video resolution, because people don't like if it's pretty noisy in the background. That is very distracting for a lot of people. Yeah. And I think if you're interested in that, it is always helpful to, for Instagram, to take good quality photos. You do not need necessarily like a good camera for that. You can do it with your phone, but like in terms of composition of the picture and things like that. That is also very helpful. And if you want some advice on that, I believe that there was one episode of Fruity Knitting where the designer Natasha Hornby did give a very good advice on taking photos and editing photos of your knitwear. That was very helpful, so you might want to look into that. Yeah. I would really love to hear your thoughts on that too. Like, what do you think is the best way to grow your reach on social media? I think it's always good to just be yourself and make good quality content, and the rest really is up to a little luck. That is not often said, but I truly believe that there can be two very similar people doing both doing a very good job, and sometimes you just get found and then it kind of snowballs, and which is good, and we all hope that will happen someday, but you know, it's also a little bit of luck, I guess. Yeah, but as I said, leave me your thoughts on that in the comments. Maybe you have experiences with what worked good for you, which content always finds a lot of reach, and which content usually is not seen by many people. Maybe you can just let us know, and we can learn together. Maybe that's a good thing. Just use this whole thing to learn from each other. So I believe we have one more question. What is your least favorite part about designing and creating a pattern? It depends on the design, I guess, because some designs go really quickly and really good, and it just kind of go by themselves. Some ideas just flow. I don't know. It's just sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's really hard. In most cases, the knitting part is easier for me than the actual pattern writing, and the grading. I don't know why, but I usually do not mind the grading as much, because it's just numbers and Excel sheets, and it can be annoying, of course, but it's not super difficult. Writing the pattern is not my most favorite part of it, although it is really something that feels great when it's done. What I definitely do not enjoy a lot is the whole admin that is needed when you release a pattern. So I usually update my website, and I update Ravelry, and then I share the new release both on Instagram and in my Ravelry group, and there's lots of steps to be done for that whole process. It usually takes me about 3 hours, I would say, about 3 hours to get all that technical stuff done. Adding the pattern to Ravelry, adding it to my website, and all that. That is not a part that I like a lot, to be honest. Sometimes test knitting can be really tough too. It is always very lovely and very great to watch the items that my testers make grow, and it can be a very lovely and friendly group, and then I enjoy it very much. But it also can be that you have knitters that don't come back to you, that disappear on you, that you send the pattern to, and you never hear back from them ever again. Then there can be knitters that were active regularly, and then 3 days before the test deadline they tell you they won't finish the item. All that can be very stressful, especially if you have a schedule where you have several designs lined up, and you kind of need to release at a certain time, and then you know, everything is turned around because people are not getting back to you. That can be very stressful. Yeah, so I think that are probably my most or my least liked parts of this whole knitwear design thing, that you have to do a lot of work behind the scenes, and that you sometimes need to rely on other people to release your patterns. What I really like is the tag editing part, to be honest, because I really feel that afterwards my pattern is really good, and it's nice to have someone to get feedback from. That is a part that I really enjoy. And of course I know that my tag editor won't ghost me or something, so I definitely know I get a feedback from her, and usually she's very fast, so that is the process I enjoy. And yeah, mostly the admin stuff behind the scenes is something that can be very annoying, but the test can also be very stressful, very intensive also, because sometimes you have to send a lot of messages. In most of the years that I've been designing, I have had 2 test knits going at the same time. So sometimes that can be up to 40, 60, 70 knitters that you work with at the same time. And as you can imagine, it is very natural for questions to come up during the test knit. And as people are all over the world, living all over the world, the questions can come in at any time during the day. And sometimes, especially in the beginning of tests, there can be a lot of messages that you need to answer. And sometimes those messages can come in through a whole lot of different channels. For example, I use the website Yarnpond to do my test knitting, and there is a chat group there, and I usually ask everybody to only send me messages in this chat group, but sometimes I also get emails and direct messages on Instagram, and sometimes it's very difficult to stay on top of things, especially if you are, like me, not designing as your main job. When you're just doing it on the side of your actual job, I do, then that can be very hard. Sometimes I answer those messages both in the morning and in the evening, and yeah, it's a lot of work. So I think that is sometimes something that is not very visible on the outside, and that is definitely the part of designing that I enjoy the least. Like all the work that I do behind the scenes every day, and it's literally every day. Like if you have test knitters, then they will most likely be most active on the weekends, because that's when they have time to knit. So you need to answer those questions in the weekend so that they don't have to wait for too long, because that would be very unpleasant for me as a knitter. If I have a question and then I have to wait for 2 weeks, that is not acceptable, I think. So I usually try to answer all the messages within 24 hours. So yeah, I think even though those parts are all necessary, and I think it's totally fine that they need to be done. Those are definitely my least favorite parts of designing. Yeah, so I believe, let me check, I believe that were all of the questions. Yes, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. I am attempting to make such a Q&A video about every 6 months, twice a year. So if you have questions for this, then please consider subscribing to my Instagram, because that is where I always collect the questions for the new Q&A video. Yeah, I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you next time with the new podcast episode. Bye!